what God has taught us is you think you know, but his ways are so different than our ways. And
always so much better than anything we could try to put together. Before we were married, I know that I had a real desire to adopt. Melissa had the same thoughts and desires as well. And so then once we got married, it was kind of one of those things that we knew that at some point we felt like God wanted us to adopt. We didn't really know the details of from where and when and anything like that. So I guess we had Isaac, and then we had Eliana.
It was actually, she was 10 months old, and we attended a conference, an adoption conference, and it was there that we got connected with Hope for Orphans and received so much training on the adoption process and received valuable information that we really began to ask God afresh of just what's our next steps.
Well, actually, at that time, we thought it probably made more sense to adopt domestically. And so we started kind of doing research on domestic adoption. But as we kept praying about it, we just didn't feel peace about that. And so then we started feeling like we were supposed to adopt internationally. And so then we just started praying for, okay, what country? God, would you give us kind of a specific country that you really lay on our heart? And so we just started praying through several different places, and that's where we kept coming back to Uganda. And God, just over the course of a year or so, just really started giving us a real desire for Uganda. And so then we just knew that we didn't still know the timing, but we knew for sure that we were supposed to start the international process to adopt from Uganda.
And then we went, and then when Eliana was 18 months old, we went to Uganda on a vision trip, and we fell in love. The people, their smiles, the lush country, the red dirt, and then when we walked into the home, I just remember God speaking to my heart of, don't judge, that don't come in here with your Western ideals and think you know, because you don't. And it was there that God began to humble me and break me and to show me his heart for the fatherless. And so while we were there, I remember, this doesn't happen often to me and it might sound weird, but I had a dream while we were there. And as soon as I woke up, in my dream, I told Joe that I had seen our daughter's face, but she was a baby. And in my dream, her name was Karis.
That's Karis, yeah.
And I just kind of tucked that away in my heart and just committed to pray for her. And I kept looking around at the orphanage thinking, is that Karis? Is that Karis?
Because at that time, that was the orphanage that we thought we were going to adopt from. So after that, we came back home. We continued
through the adoption process. Through paperwork.
Yeah, through the paperwork, through all of the training. And at that time, I remember God had really continued to kind of reaffirm Uganda and a baby, and we really felt like we were going to adopt a baby. But after being in Uganda, we thought only God's going to be able to work that out, because I think about the youngest that, usually that you would adopt is probably a year to 18 months. And so we actually just committed that to prayer and just continued to kind of trust God with that. And I believe we started the process again, right?
Well, we got pregnant with our third child.
That's right.
And I was probably 5 months pregnant at the time. And Joe says, I think it's time. I'm like, time for what? And he said, time to start the adoption process. I said, now? Okay.
And it was interesting because I remember at being in worship, and it was like every 2 or 3 weeks that I'd be in worship, and I just felt like God kept saying, okay, and it's time to start. And I was just like, seriously? You're 5 months pregnant? We just moved to Austin, started a new job, building a house. I mean, it was just, there were so many things that naturally didn't seem to really fit or make sense. But I remember being in worship, there was just such an overwhelming peace of knowing that this is what we were supposed to do. During that time, we'd actually just finished our house. Remember the weekend after we finished, that's whenever Paul and Robin, the Austin Stone counseling team, had asked if we would be open to hosting a family that was coming into town for counseling, because they had adopted a girl who, after she moved here, they realized that she was pregnant. And so we opened up our home, and we said, of course, we found out, the ties to Uganda, and so we said, of course.
Maybe the second night they were here, I remember Joe and I laying in bed, and he looked over at me and he said, I think she's our birth mom. And I said, you really think? And in my heart, I knew. And so we just didn't say anything. We just waited and prayed.
Over those few days, just thinking, how in the world is this possible? Only God could do this. And so then I just kept having these flashbacks for the last, by that time it had been probably 3 or 4 years maybe. And I just thought, is this really this kind of weave of God, just kind of making something beautiful here that is just so far beyond anything that we could conjure up ourselves. And so while they were here, I just kept thinking, I can't imagine that this is it. And we laugh about it now, but our Ugandan baby was born here in Austin.
We love our birth mom. She is our hero, that she would trust God enough to have a baby that she didn't expect. I'm so honored to know her. She's one of my favorite people on this planet, and I'll spend the rest of my life telling her thank you for giving us such a sweet gift. And she actually let me be in the room with her when she had her, and I never cry at my births. I don't know why, but Karis came out and I just was bawling like a baby, and she held her in her arms and she handed her to me and said, I love you, I'll pray for you every day, and now I'm giving you the life that God wanted for you. And those words I'll always cherish.
Looking back, I knew at specific steps along the way that this is exactly what God wanted us to do. But I remember right before Karis was born, I still had this kind of, was I really going to love her like our biological children? And just had this question. And it was so powerful because sitting in the hospital, as soon as I held her, it's like we had this immediate connection. And I just remember, probably with our other kids, it usually took, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so before we really had this real deep connection. And with Karis, it was literally as soon as I got home.
And she's a daddy's girl. Her and her daddy have been like this since the day she was born, is that she lights up a room for no one but him. And that has been so fun to watch, to see how God has done it with our whole family. Not just Joe and I, but with the kids. I wondered how those dynamics would go. Sometimes they'll say, well, they'll talk about when Karis came out of my tummy. I'm like, well, I have to remind them of the story, but that God has so knit all of our hearts together that they can't even remember that God brought her a different way.
Whenever I held Karis for the first time, it was like it hit me in such a powerful way of like, okay, this is what it means to be adopted by Christ. And that was the most powerful thing for me. And again, a week doesn't go by that I don't hold Karis and I don't think, this is what God's done for me.
It has been such a privilege and a gift to be a part of Hope for Orphans. And one of the sweetest parts for us has been to see how God is mobilizing the church to care for the orphan, and not just to put a Band-Aid, but how can the church rise up and do what they're called to do. and even in the most unreached parts of the world, children are receiving hope, and families and even bodies of Christ that didn't even know their call to be a part of this process are hearing for the first time and receiving resources and things that would help them and equip them to do that. And we are so honored to be a part of Hope for Orphans, and we hope that you will too.
So.